Hi, hello, welcome. My name is Liz and you're watching For Booking Out Loud. Today I thought we'd look at books that personally made me into the reader I am today. So we're going to look at 8 books that, at least at the time, I absolutely adored. Now, maybe they're not that good now that I am older and I look back on them, but when I was younger, maybe I was just starting to read, or maybe I just needed it at the time. These were books that were essential to me becoming the reader I am today, me becoming a vigorous reader, and just needing that type of book at that moment in my life. Alright, so the first book we are going to look at is Inkheart. Inkheart was my first fantasy novel, or at least this long of a fantasy novel. It is about a father and a daughter who absolutely love reading. The main character in this book, a girl named Maggie, describes her house covered in books. Even the bathroom has books, the hallways have books. However, even though her life is filled with books, her father never reads out loud to her. And it is later revealed that everything her father reads out loud jumps out of the pages. And as my first fantasy novel, the idea that books can come alive was so intriguing to me. If books can jump out of the page, that would be so wonderful. So going in and finding a novel to just come alive in the way that this book does was, number one, amazing. Number two, finishing my longest fantasy novel when I was young was incredible and such an accomplishment. And 3, just having something to discuss with others that have read this book was great, because I don't believe the 3rd book was out during that time. So just that anticipation, reading that series all the way through. But this is one book that I do highly recommend others read if they're looking for maybe a middle grade fantasy. Inkheart for the win. The second book that was influential to me as a reader is Fablehaven by Mull. This book was sort of forced on me when I was younger, but either way, it was so influential. I absolutely fell in love with this story. It is about 2 siblings called Kendra and Seth. They are left with their grandparents for the summer because their parents were sent on a cruise and they weren't invited. Their grandparents are so weird to them and they're absolutely dreading this summer break. However, as the days progress, they find out their grandparents' weirdness is a result of the land that they live on. It ends up being a magical sanctuary for magical creatures of all kinds. Not only centaurs and fairies, but witches and demons live on their parents' land. And their parents are the caretakers for this land. The adventures that they go on, or the misadventures that they go on because of this, are what make this book. You go between Seth's perspective, you go between Kendra's perspective, and just the resulting consequences of each decision is well developed by Mull. This series is a 5-book series, and you have different adventures for each one. I loved this series growing up, and I really felt like it never should have ended the way that it did, but it truly solidified my love for everything fantasy and everything that had fantastical creatures in it. Fablehaven is always my go-to comfort read, but if you are interested in wonderful middle reads with fantasy elements in them and you have not read Fablehaven, do yourself a favor and do it. Alright, the third book on this list is Aragon by Christopher Paulini. This book is about a young man who works on a farm, and one day when he's off hunting, he discovers a blue egg. Now, a couple days later, this egg ends up hatching, and he becomes one of the first dragon riders in this land for almost 100 years. Now, Aragon is in a 4-book series, but this is the first huge book I read, in my opinion, at the time, with sort of smaller font sizes-ish. I read this book in 4th grade when I was so eager to start reading books and start reading longer books and books that were in series. So during our mandatory reading time, me and the person sitting across from me decided to pick Aragon up together and read it. It was so fun discussing this book with him, how cool the characters were and how fantastical dragons were and the ability to ride them. Just how fun reading the series along, because at that time only this book and the sequel were out, and I remember meeting up with him again in middle school to discuss the 3rd book when it came out. As someone who is experiencing all of these for the first time, it was absolutely perfect, and it definitely solidified my love for fantasy, and I would highly recommend this book in particular for someone who really wants to get into something like this. The next series that was very influential to me as a reader is called Secret of the Sirens, and I actually don't own a physical copy of this book because I read all the series on my e-reader for the first time, and this is what solidified an e-reader as my go-to for reading, actually. And that's why it was so influential. At that moment in my life, I was reading a ton of books and I was going to the library all the time, but I also needed something that I could carry easily with me to and from school, to and from classes, so I didn't lose anything. I was really busy. I was just entering middle school, and as middle schoolers are, very forgetful. And so having one thing to go to all the time was quite nice. Now, Secret of the Sirens is about Connie, who is finding out for the first time that she can control magical creatures. Well, I shouldn't really say control. She can be a companion to magical creatures. But what truly makes this book unique is its strong environmental undertones. It has a very strong companion piece of we need to do something and save the environment. So yeah, we have all these wonderful magical creatures in this book, but things are happening to them, things are making them angry, and the reason is because their environments are in danger. And so Connie and her companions and her friends overtake the idea that they need to do something about it. And as a very impressionable mind, that really resonated with me. So for that sole reason, I think I'll always love this series. This next book goes along with Secret of the Sirens because it continues that theme of environmentalism. And that's actually Maximum Ride by James Patterson. I was really on this kick of books with fantasy, books that have environmental undertones. And my friends and I in middle school actually found this in the library, Maximum Ride series. I think the first one is the Angel Experiment or School's Out. I'll put it right here somewhere. We found this in the library. We were like, this sounds cool. It's a book about winged children. Why don't we read it? And then of course it ends up being this environmental book all about these kids trying to do something, trying to save the environment. And we just go full force into it. We devoured the whole series, and it ends up that the last book comes out the same year that we were reading the series. And so we were all talking about it. We were all trying to ask ourselves what we could do. Having this book come out, having that constant conversation really helped continue my love of reading. So the next book is Reincarnation by Susan Nguyen. This book is about two souls that travel throughout history to just be together. It starts in prehistoric times, caveman era, and ends in modern era. And it travels with them to just see their story and their struggle to find each other. And they always do. No matter if it's ancient Rome, no matter if it's the plague, no matter if it's the 60s, they will find each other. They both become women, they're both men. They can be a man and a woman. It can be a woman and a woman. It can be a man and a man. And it's not always romantic, but they want to be together. So the reason that this book was important to me as a reader was because this was my first book for romance. I picked it up at a Scholastic fair when I was younger, and I was just kind of curious about the subject of romance, and also the idea that it was a historical fiction, which I did not have much experience with. And having each chapter be a moment in ancient history to just history to modern was very influential to me, to the point where I still study so much history today. And I just really enjoyed it. I would not say this is a really good novel. I think if I'd read it now, I might give it 2 stars, 2.5 stars, just because the setting isn't truly developed, the characters cannot be developed. But as a very young reader, being able to have this experience for the first time was key for me. The next book is another romance. It's called Wicked Lovely by Melissa Marr. And this book is about a girl who can see fairies. Now, this is a book that takes the fantasy fairy trope and makes it evil. In this book, fairies are not good things. Fairies are truly evil. They wreak havoc, they hurt people, they do not like humans. And so for Aslan, who is the main character, it is very dangerous for her. And she's known her whole life that because she can see them, she is in danger. And then of course, everything turns on its head because she finds out that the Summer King has chosen her to be his next winter girl, which is a whole ritual that fairies have. And so she has to navigate that she knows and doesn't want them to know that she can see them, but also pretend that she doesn't know that there's a ritual going on and still avoid it. So you have romance, you have fantasy. It's good. I enjoy it. It's a fast pace, it's a strong-headed woman character, and you just keep going. It's the first of a series, and I highly recommend this series, and I highly recommend this book too. The thing that made this book influential to me was that not only was it fantasy, because there might be a trend here, but this book was kind of the first instance that I had of a book flipping a typical story on its head. Yes, you have fairies, but they're not frolicking in the woods. They're not little people that do good things for the forest this time. And yes, you have romance. However, this time it's not black or white. You don't just have this one guy that's a clear choice and this other guy that's not, and she's gonna go with the other guy. No, you have one guy that is kind of good, I guess, but you should not go with that one, and this one, you probably shouldn't go with that one either, so who is this girl gonna choose? And then you also have a very strong-headed girl that's just trying to survive in maybe not the best world. And so as a young, impressionable mind reading this, I was like, wow, stories don't always have to be this one linear trope or genre or ideal. Stories can be different, stories can change. And so this book really introduced me to this whole new genre that I have been exploring ever since. So the last book I would say that really influenced me as a reader would be I Tell You I Love You, But Then I Have to Kill You by Ali Carter. This is another book that I picked up at a Scholastic fair that I was very intrigued by, and I believe this is actually the only book on this list that is not fantasy, and that's why it's influential to me. This is about a girl named Cammie who goes to an all-girls boarding school, and she is 16 years old, and she has been going to the school since she was, I think, 11? However, she goes to this all-girls school, and it's typical except for the fact that they are teaching the girls to be spies. Her mom is the headmaster at this school, so that means her mom is also a trained spy. What makes this year special is that she finds herself in a relationship with a boy, and this boy has no idea that she is being trained to be a spy. The reason that this book is influential to me, after I gave it that raving summary, is that it's the first book that I remember reading that wasn't fantasy that truly caught my attention. I believe at the time that I stopped reading the series, there was 5 out, but I was so anticipating each and every release, and it wasn't fantasy. It was a realistic fiction book. Yes, it was romance. Yes, it's definitely middle grade, but it was something that got me into a different genre and showed me that other genres are just as exciting as fantasy. I don't know if I would truly recommend it for others, because I'm sure there's a million of other good books at this point, but this is the one that truly told me, go explore, go out, go have fun. There's not just one thing out there. Not that fantasy and just reading fantasy is bad, but I love reading all types of genres now. I read everything from nonfiction to mystery horror to trashy romance, and I count that under the influence of this book. So, thank you. I Tell You I Love You, But Then I'd Have to Kill You. Those were the 8 books that truly influenced me as a reader, and I'm sure there was so many other books. However, these are the ones that I remember. These are the ones still in my library, and I just hope that would tell you something about me as a reader. And if you have books that influenced you to be who you are as a reader today, those are the 8 books that truly influenced me to be the reader I am today. A lot of them were middle grade, a lot of them were fantasy, but that's what got me into being who I am today as a reader. I do enjoy a lot of fantasy, but now I also enjoy everything outside of that genre as well. If you have any books that truly influenced you to be who you are today, I would love to know that as well. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day.